Good evening. It is 7 o'clock, so I will call to order this meeting of the Noblesville Common Council for March 15th. If you'll please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Ayer, if you will please lead us tonight.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. Ms. Lees, would you do the roll call, please?
Mr. Ayer,
present.
Mr. Boyce,
Present.
Mr. Davis,
Present.
Mr. O'Connor,
Here.
Mr. Peterson,
Here.
Mr. Schwartz,
Present.
Mr. Smith,
Present.
Mr. Sparks,
Present.
Ms. Wiles.
Present.
Madam President, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Moving on, the next item is the approval of the executive session memorandum from our meeting on February 22nd.
Move to approve. Second.
It's been moved and approved. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Okay, so you're going to abstain. Okay, so 7 in favor, 2 abstentions. Okay. Moving on to the approval of the minutes for February 8th.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Dad, are you in or are you?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay, you're going to abstain. So 7 in favor, 2 abstentions.
All right.
Great. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 9-0. Petitions or comments by citizens. I have 2 slips that have been filled out. If anyone else would like to make comments, please fill out one of these forms and then hand it to the clerk. We will ask that all comments be kept to a 3-minute time limit. Mr. Smith's going to be our timekeeper this evening. And we ask that all comments be a new comment or a new point of view. We would rather not have the same comment repeated over and over again. And when you come up, if you will please state your name and your address for the record. Thank you very much. Moving on to council committee reports. Our first one is from the Roads Committee. Mr. O'Connor.
Thank you, Madam President. The Roads Committee met March 4th. As you may have noticed, there are several things happening in the city from a roads perspective. Lighting on 146th Street is moving forward. There's been poles have been removed, and then the new installation will start sometime this month, so you'll see that happening. Street rehabilitation, the first contract, Whitcomb Ridge, River Run, West Ridge, some streets in Old Town that will move forward this spring. The community crossing grants have been submitted. We should get some feedback on those in early April, which will allow for additional subdivision resurfacing. The bridge over Kerrigan Road, the dimmers have been installed on lighting, so I think that will tone down some of the lumens across the bridge, so to speak. One thing I think folks are aware of, but the 146th Street and Allisonville interchange, that's moving forward. That's a county project. That will entail a road closure. So for those of you on the south side of the city, and or if you're coming from the south side, those bids are supposed to go out, I think sometime towards the end of '22. So the road closure, I don't know that we have specific time frames on that, but we will make that information available, so keep an eye out for that, because it's a major project. I don't think that won't start until 146 and 37 is complete, so you won't have both interchanges tied up. There's several NDOT projects that we're working on, most of which and probably most importantly are the roundabouts on State Road 38, at Oakmont, Logan Street. Those are scheduled into 22 and 23. There's the 32 added travel lanes. That'll be down the road a piece. That's a 25, 26 project, I believe, but we're working on that with NDOT. Additional signal poles on 32 downtown, that's continues to move ahead. Trying to find some of the updates. As you can tell, there's a number of things happening here. The Pleasant Street project continues to move forward. I think you've all seen the news announcement that we've come to an agreement on some right-of-way with our friends at IDI, so that's on our agenda this evening. And then there's a variety of different MPO projects which are federally funded, and we, as a city, match part of those. The South Allisonville Road Trail, Little Chicago Road Trail over Morris Lake, and we've got several others that are on here that I won't go into detail on, but as you might guess, I've got from the meeting, I've got 9 pages of minutes, so there's quite a bit of activity going on in the city, and you'll see the various construction projects in different places, but those are the highlights.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connor. Any questions? No. Moving on to the wastewater committee report. Mr. Sparks.
Thank you, Madam President. We met on Monday, March 7th. Mr. Margot, he's been reviewing the budget, and he would like to take a different approach with it, and they stated that he would like to include more definition in it, and they prepared 2 capital budgets for citizens energy in the past, and he stated his goal is not to underspend on capital assets, but to reinvest savings wisely and to add value. So what he's going to work on that.
Mr. Sparks, can you pull your microphone a little bit closer to your mouth and speak a little?
That.
Speak
Hi,
up.
That might
thanks,
be
that's
better.
better, huh? All right. Okay, where was I? He's going to prepare 2 separate budgets for that to move forward with different capital expenditures that are going to be taking place. And let's see. Utility and trash fee payments are currently sent to a lockbox in Detroit, and he's going to be looking into getting local lockboxes instead, and updating the payment options for customers. He also informed the committee that there are some constituents that we might be hearing from, stated that some developments were approved in the 2000 to 2007 range, and their sump pumps are draining into the under drains underneath the curbs on the streets, and so they're getting clogged up with roots. So there's going to have to be some repairs and some replacement done with that, so he's working on a plan for that. Let's see, and then the number 2 lift station currently is the largest lift station, but once it's renovated, it'll be it's the second largest, and once it's renovated, it'll be the largest serving into Wayne Township. Heavy development into Wayne Township in the near future, and explained the cost of the project was estimated around $10 million. Let's see. And then also there's a new lift station that'll be built just north of a little north of the current one on lift station 9, and he stated that contract should go to bid by the end of this year. And that's about it. It's the first meeting we've had this year, so we're ironing out what we're going to be doing. So that's it.
All right, thank you very
Right.
much. And the next committee report is from Mr. Davis, Finance Committee.
Thank you, Madam President. We met March 10th. Myself, Greg O'Connor, Darren Peterson, and Aaron Smith. Chuck Haberman discussed the economic development agreement with Washington Business Park for Phase 2. Chuck also discussed with us a project agreement grant application for Make Mine Move, a remote worker incentive program with the state. We had an IT update with Microsoft Enterprise Agreement with Jamie Yost. Brandon Bennett discussed with us the fiscal action needed for appropriation transfer for parks, for a parks golf position reclassification. And Jeff Spalding discussed a fiscal action, additional appropriation for the Levison Garage bond debt service payment. And he also discussed with us a fiscal action, property acquisition for Pleasant Street expansion. That and the claims docket comes to the council with a favorable recommendation.
Thank you. Any questions?
Madam President, I move that we approve the claims as submitted.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the claims as presented. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 9-0. Mr. Mayor, would you like to make a few comments?
About flipped out of my chair, Madam President. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I have 3 items that I would like to go over just briefly with you, Madam President, members of the council. First of all, I just want to thank all those who took time prior to tonight's event to tour our new de-escalation training center in the basement of City Hall. The public is welcome to learn more about that as well by contacting City Hall or our police department. But as I said down there this evening, public safety in Noblesville looks a lot different than it did when I was growing up as a kid here in Noblesville. We are oftentimes faced with folks sometimes in their worst situation. And our officers, our guys and gals who wear the uniform, come upon situations that are oftentimes in need of de-escalation. And so our goal is to make sure that they are equipped every single day to help keep our community the safest it can be. Without a safe community, that is really what drives our future here in Noblesville and is job number 1 for our administration going forward. So thank you to the council for not only funding that de-escalation training center, but all of you who took time tonight to learn more about it. I really, really appreciate it. Secondly, it was mentioned earlier tonight, but one of our administration's top priorities is a new east to west corridor in the city of Noblesville, which is Pleasant Street. We're well underway after 37 years of talking about it to actually going to construction later this year on that project. And I can tell you that there is a public information meeting next Thursday evening, which is March 24th here at City Hall at 5:30. I think this is over the years probably public information meeting number 17, but this is really getting very real for a lot of residents in Noblesville. So if you have questions about the route, if you'd like to learn more about timing or funding plan, please feel free to join us next Thursday evening, the 24th, here at 5:30 to talk with our members of our engineering team. Our administrative staff will be here as well to help answer any questions as we look to a late 2022 construction on phase 1 of Pleasant Street. So we're very excited at that. And then last but not least, on a less than exciting note, you all got an email this morning from a good friend of mine and a wonderful public servant, our city attorney, Lindsay Bennett. She is our first city in-house legal counsel for the city of Noblesville and has done wonders over the past 2 years, really helping to tackle some big ticket items that not only the administration has been focused on, but the city council has been focused on as well. I challenged our team from day 1 on January 1st of 2020 to go chase lions and dream big, and Lindsay has done that. And of course, because she's such a good lion chaser, someone else noticed her talent, and she'll be leaving us at the end of the month to join a firm down in Indianapolis, actually to start a new sector of their practice. So it's a huge kudos to her. It's something I know she wrestled with incredibly quite a bit with. We've talked ad nauseum about it, and she has to make decisions that's best for her and her 3 small kids as well, and so we wish her well in that journey, but we hate to lose her. In the meantime, John Hughes, who is very familiar to all of you, grew up 2 houses from City Hall, is with Bose Public Affairs, and he'll be filling in on an as-needed basis for the next several months while we can kind of embark on that search for a new in-house legal counsel. But you'll see no stop in progress going forward, but we wish Lindsay well. She'll be with us for another council meeting here in a couple weeks as well. But tough news, but again, I think one of the biggest compliments we can get is when we have amazing staff that go on and do amazing things. So kudos to her, and with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you all have. Seeing none, thanks so much for your time tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, moving on to previously discussed ordinances. We have ordinance 04-02-22. Council to consider ordinance 04-02-22, an ordinance for the change of land use and sub-district categories from office and 146th Street corridor to single-family land use with a sub-district overlay of mixed residential, all a part of the corporate campus plan development district for approximately 21 acres adjacent to the northeast intersection of Campus Parkway and Maryland Road. I will also discuss the next item, ordinance 05-02-22. Council is to consider ordinance 05-02-22, an ordinance for the adoption of a preliminary development plan including waivers and stipulations for a single-family land use with sub-district overlay of mixed residential, all a part of the corporate campus plan development district consisting of 21 acres to be known as Maria Plan Development, adjacent to the northeast intersection of Campus Parkway and Maryland Road. Mr. Martin.
Thank you. Kevin Martin with the city's planning department. So to start off, just to show you the site as it looks today. As you mentioned, this is the northeast corner of Campus Parkway and Maryland Road. And these two items before you are to establish a residential development. First item is seeking the rezoning to allow that use. And the second item is the plan development ordinance, which will regulate the development being proposed. Here you can see the preliminary development plan that you have previously seen. As I mentioned at your last meeting, this item went to the Plan Commission and received a unanimous recommendation for approval. No substantial changes have been made to the application in that time. The item is just back for its final discussion before you all. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer them, and if you have any questions for the applicant, they're also here present.
Any questions of Mr. Martin or the applicant? Hearing none, we could have a motion for both ordinances.
Madam President,
Mr. Smith,
I move to approve ordinances number 04-02-22 and number 05-02-22 as presented. Second.
it's been moved and seconded to approve ordinances 04-02-22 and 05-2-22. This is a roll call vote. Ms. Lees?
Mr. Air,
Aye.
Mr. Boyce,
Aye.
Mr. Davis,
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor,
Aye.
Mr. Peterson,
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz,
Aye.
Mr. Smith,
Aye.
Mr. Sparks,
Aye.
Ms. Wiles.
Aye.
9 ayes, 0 nay, the ordinance is approved.
Thank you very much.
Ordinances.
Thank you very much. New ordinances for discussion. We have ordinance 09-03-22. Council to consider ordinance 09-03-22, an ordinance enacting and adopting a supplement to the Code of Ordinances. Mrs. Lees.
Move to introduce.
Second.
Pardon me, I'm multitasking. Good evening. This is the annual act of codifying the ordinances that were passed in 2021. They go into our code of ordinances. Actually, they go into our online code as they are approved, but we still do have some hard copy ordinances, and this adopts the supplement from everything that was passed in 2021. Because this is a routine ordinance that we do every year, I would request respectfully that you pass it on first reading.
Okay. Any questions of Mrs. Lees?
Madam President,
Mr. O'Connor?
I would move that we suspend the rules and pass ordinance 09-03-22 on first reading.
Second that.
It's been moved and seconded to waive the rules and approve ordinance 09-03-22 on first reading. All those in favor of waiving the rules, raise your right hand. 9-0.
Madam President,
Mr. O'Connor?
I would move that we approve ordinance 09-03-22 as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance 09-03-22 as presented. This is a roll call vote. Ms. Lees?
Mr. Boyce?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Sparks?
Aye.
Mr. Air?
Aye.
Ms. Wiles?
Aye.
9 ayes, 0 nay, the ordinance is approved.
Ordinance 10-03-22. Council to consider ordinance 10-03-22, an ordinance approving additional appropriations in the American Rescue Plan Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund for acquisition of real estate and establishing a public hearing.
Move to introduce.
Second.
Mr. Barris.
Thank you, Sam Barris, filling in for Jeff Spalding tonight. So as mentioned, this is an additional appropriation out of the American Rescue Plan Coronavirus Fiscal Relief Fund. This appropriates the remaining amount from our first tranche of funding under that federal legislation. So this is the money we received last year. There's approximately $2.2 million remaining from that first distribution, and we expect to receive about $3.1 million more from that funding source this year. So in this case, you're being asked to approve that funding to assist with an acquisition of property related to the Pleasant Street construction project that was referenced by the mayor earlier. There is actually an agreement for that acquisition on the agenda tonight, so if there's any specific questions about that acquisition process, my suggestion would be to talk about them during that discussion. I am happy to answer any questions about the funding source itself or the fiscal action. What I'll say is that, as you know, there are several approved uses for funding under this legislation. One of them is for replacement of lost revenues, and if you're using that provision, you are able to use those dollars for any governmental purpose. In this case, we're using them to further a capital project that we obviously see as critical to the city's success. So happy to answer any questions. And again, this is a first reading, so this will be back on the agenda in 2 weeks.
Any questions of Mr. Barris?
Madam President,
Mr. Smith.
I move to establish a public hearing for ordinance number 10-03-22 at our next regular meeting.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to establish a public hearing at our next regular meeting. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 9-0. Thank you very much. Council to consider ordinance 11-03-22, an ordinance approving additional appropriations in the debt service and COET sinking fund for debt service payments and establishing a public hearing. Mr. Barris.
Thank you, council members. So this fund, the COET Debt Sinking Fund, receives a portion of the city's annual local income tax distribution. We've been using this fund exclusively for the purpose of making debt service payments to bonds we issued to fund the construction of the Levinson parking garage. So in 2022, our budget anticipated that we would start seeing some TIF increment revenue accruing to a TIF fund that would pay for a portion of this debt service. At the time we did the budget, we made the assumption that that would be $200,000. What I'll say about that assumption is it was just that. It wasn't an informed, rigorous estimate of what our TIF increment would be. That was essentially unknowable at that time. So what we have is a situation where we have slightly less than that based on up-to-date projections from a firm we use to help us analyze our TIF districts. And so an additional appropriation from this funding source is needed to make sure we have authority to cover the full debt service payment. So what we've done here is we have the additional appropriation set up for the full $200,000. So essentially there will be no more actions related to this debt service payment this year. That said, we are going to be receiving some TIF increment, so whatever we receive will still be put towards this debt service payment. And the final thing I'll add, just to make sure there's no confusion, is the fact that there's not $200,000 in a TIF fund does not say anything about the success of the project or the financial situations of that TIF district. It has everything to do with the fact that we were making an assumption in the budget that ended up not being correct, or not being hyper accurate, I should say. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and again, this one is also a two-step process, so this would be back on the agenda in 2 weeks as well.
Any questions for Mr. Barris on this item?
Madam President,
Mr. Smith.
I move to establish a public hearing for ordinance number 11-3-22 at our next regular meeting.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to establish a public hearing. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 9-0. Ordinance, I'm going to read these two together. We have 12-03-22. Council to consider ordinance 12-03-22, an ordinance for the change of zoning from R1 low-density single-family residential and FH flood hazard to R3 moderate to high-density single-family residential and FH flood hazard for approximately 153 acres adjacent to East 161st Street, Mill Creek Road, and East 171st Street. Have a motion to introduce this one.
Move to introduce.
Second?
And then the next one is council to consider ordinance 13-03-22, an ordinance for the change of zoning from R3 moderate to high-density single-family residential and FH flood hazard to R3-FH/PD residential flood hazard plan development for approximately 153 acres adjacent to East 161st Street, Mill Creek Road, and East 171st Street.
Move to introduce.
Second?
Ms. Eshelman,
Good evening.
good evening.
So I have just a general location map up for those to see where it is. This will be 171st, 161st, Mill Creek, and then Seminole Road curves from there. So planning has been having conversations about development of this property for approximately 12 to 14 years. They've filed for public hearings in 3 different instances. There was a 2014 version that there was an entrance off of Mill Creek Road. That's the biggest change that we've seen from this development. By going to the 2 entrances off of 161st and 171st, you can see from this memo that Allison Krupski, our city engineer, prepared. That had the biggest impact on their recommendation as it goes to this project. That's under number 2 in the memo. The property is currently zoned R1. There is a county legal drain that runs along the west side of the property. And then there's also a tributary off of that legal drain that runs across the northern portion of the property. The Unified Development Ordinance prohibits development in floodplains, and the petitioner plans to preserve those areas to remain as natural as possible. There are some changes that are being required by the county surveyor's office. A lot of those legal drains, they're asking that trees be cut down on one side of that legal drain to allow them to have maintenance access to those legal drains. The proposal for this property is a residential subdivision of up to 339 units to include single-family detached homes of varying sizes. The applicant did provide a traffic study as part of their application. The traffic study notes no real changes need to be made, with the exception that there are some needed changes to the traffic signs for westbound 161st Street at Seminole Road. It recommends the installation of an additional stop sign on the south side of that intersection and to reset the existing stop sign and to cut back some of the existing vegetation. Basically, if you haven't been out there, it's very difficult. That stop sign like immediately pops out at you when you're almost on top of it. So they're just suggesting those changes to improve safety at that intersection. The study does note that while there will be additional traffic from the development, the intersections in the area continue to maintain A and B levels of service. Drivers in the area have alternates that allow them to use other roads if they are not comfortable with the route. The state is also about to begin significant improvements to State Road 32 between Westfield and Noblesville, as Mr. O'Connor noted earlier. Those upgrades do include the installation of a roundabout at Mill Creek Road and State Road 32 that is likely to begin construction in 2025 or 2026. Since engineering last year began the process of a small structures survey just to grade the infrastructure that we have. They have recently gotten the results of that small structures survey, and there is a culvert on 161st Street, approximately 500 feet east of this property, that does need to be replaced. The approval of this development would accelerate the replacement timeline and capital costs incurred by the city. That area also consists of some poor soils. Most of you will know it as the place where the road waves a little. Engineering, on here, they have already begun engineering design for the replacement of that culvert, and it will be replaced in 2023. The recommendation with the approval of this project, though, is that the entrance off 161st Street be a right-in, right-out, left-in. So what that means is everyone entering the subdivision from either eastbound or westbound traffic on 161st will be able to enter the subdivision, but when they exit onto 161st, they will be forced right, which would take them out to Hazeldale and 161st, so that roundabout intersection. The development does include several amenities, including a centrally located amenity center, along with a number of trails. The petitioner is also reserved. So this is the development plan. They have reserved area in this location so that when the property to the west of them is also a farm field, and we anticipate development of that property at some point. They have reserved an area for a street connection into that property to the west if it were to develop. The development consists of 5 different areas with minimum lot sizes ranging from 6,200 square feet to 10,200 square feet, and minimum home sizes ranging from 1,600 square feet to 2,000 square feet. 4 of those areas within the development will be developed by Lennar and Pulte Homes. There is a section, this yellow area is a semi-custom home section. The lots will be for sale. The standards within the PD ordinance adopt written architectural standards for those homes to be built on that site, but they will be open to multiple builders if requested. This, the Plan Commission did hear this at their February meeting. They sent this with a favorable recommendation, 6-0, including 5 stipulations and conditions that were included in the Plan Commission staff report, which was part of the packet presented to you. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions for Ms. Eshelman? All right, seeing none, I believe the presenter or petitioner is here.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the council. Mark Gradison, Gradison Land Development, offices at 6330 East 75th Street in Indianapolis, but I am a Noblesville resident as well. Thank you for your time this evening. As many of you have seen, Magnolia Ridge has gone through several changes and modifications through the years in order to get to a place where I believe staff, administration, and we are comfortable moving forward with this new design that you have seen. Magnolia is 153 acres, as Denise had pointed out. That is 171st Street at the north, 161st Street on the south. We've highlighted a few of the areas around us. As far as the neighborhoods go, you have Twin Oaks, Lake Forest, Wood Hollow, Essex, Cherry Tree, Midland Overlook, Willow Lake, and Cherry Tree Farms. And I think part of the reason for going over this slide for you is to really show to you that this is an infill location. We have development all around us. We have sanitary sewers on the northern portion and the southern portion of the development. We have water at both locations as well. And so this area is ready to go from a site perspective. We aren't extending sewer a mile away or something like that. So that is kind of the location, and again, give you that overview of where the site is from a development perspective. Next is the comprehensive plan, kind of an outline of the comprehensive plan there for you. It is density of the comprehensive calls for density of 2 to 5 units per acre, and obviously we fall within that range in which we're planning for our development. Try to get the whole thing in there, get most of it at least. So in our development, as Ms. Ashman stated, we have 5 different areas inside our development. We have homes that'll be traditional 2 stories. We have homes that will be empty nester in nature. We have homes that will be semi-custom to custom homes that is in this eastern portion of the neighborhood. So we've tried to develop a property that has the ability to have folks move in early in life and stay through the end of their life if they so choose. We hope to have an amenity package that will encourage those folks to be able to stay there for the duration of the time, and I'll share that with you here in a second. Some of the main changes since we were last here to see you are really threefold. The first one being the custom home lots that we added here along the eastern side, and working with staff. That was something key that they really wanted to have, so we were able to do that. We originally had duplexes in this location here, and we have since made those now single-family homes. And then the third item was we had a trail, and working with staff, we had a trail going over to the east across the Vestal Ditch. That trail on the other side there, unfortunately, is a private trail. So we are not able to hook our public trail into theirs. So we went ahead and modified our trail system to include a little bit more on-site and have it kind of meandering through our open space. Speaking of open space, we do have over 50 acres of open space on this site. Roughly 35%, a little over 35% of our space is open. That helps keep us keeps the site with some big usable acres for our clients and our customers in the future. And they're able to have roughly 2 miles of trails within the development. We'll hopefully be able to provide them access through Midland Overlook to get to the Midland Trail, which is north of us as well. One of the questions, or one of the key things at Plan Commission certainly was traffic. And Steve Farabach was with us from A&F Engineering that evening and was able to address a lot of the questions that arose during that conversation with the Plan Commission. And unfortunately, Steve wasn't able to be with us this evening. He had a prior commitment that he didn't realize up with a lot of the other engineers in the state up at the road school up at Purdue this evening. So he is able to answer questions afterwards, should there be any. We can communicate via email or whatever the appropriate setup is, or at the 29th meeting if so desired. Some of the highlights from the traffic standpoint, I don't want to get too much into them, but as I'm not a traffic engineer, but the key would be from where we were years ago, as Ms. Asherman pointed out, is we eliminated the entrance on Mill Creek Seminole, which therefore, in the furthering of that traffic study with the new layout, eliminated a lot of the traffic that would run down north and south on Mill Creek Seminole Road and through the S-turn. The right in, right out, and left in can be designed. It has been designed by A&F before. Locally, at the I-Town Church at 136th and Brook School, there's one of those already in existence that A&F did engineer, so they will assist us in our engineering to satisfy the request from staff and the engineering department. Safety is one of those things that is measured from a traffic perspective and sometimes numbers, but most of the time it is science and it is numbers. But in looking at this, as you have more people on a road, I'm not saying you want to have thousands more people on a road, but as more people are on a road, you will get a little bit of slowdown of traffic as you run in that area, just by nature. More cars on the road, people will be a little bit more cautious. So that was one of the things that was discussed at the Plan Commission. And then we are, as per staff's request and the information from A&F, is we will be providing some additional warning signs at the 161st and Seminole intersection as well. and share with you our amenity. Oh, I misplaced it. There we go. So our entry signage, much as we've been proposing all along, so Magnolia Ridge sign there, and then our amenity is a pool area with a baby pool, kids pool, bathhouse, kind of a parking area here, and then we will have a trailhead entrance here that goes into our main trails throughout the development, our 8-foot path that will be throughout the development. That's pretty much all my, what I wanted to confer, to get through to you tonight, and we're here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions of the petitioner? Not at this time? Okay. Mr. O'Connor, you look like you might have a question. I'm not forcing you to have one, so I'm just,
I was looking at the amenity area and trying to get a feel for how many parking spaces. We've got 339 lots. Is that right?
Yes, that is
Trying to
correct.
figure out if that's gonna provide enough parking, but hopefully people will get on the trail and walk
And
there.
walk or ride their bike. We will have bike parking, if you will, obviously within the parking lot area, but also there will be some trailhead spots for bikes to pull into and lock if they so desire.
And that entrance was 136th and Brook School?
The current one that ANF has done,
designed.
yes. So as you come over, as you go north on Brook School over the overpass of 69 and come down to the 136 roundabout, it's at that location.
Right in, right out, left, right?
Yes. And so the left lane is a full left lane. It's not a passing blister. So in what we're proposing for us will be basically a lane shift. And the left-hand turn lane will be there, and then the traffic will run straight through that are running from west to east on 161st Street. They won't have to dodge around the cars turning left
Go
into
straight
Seminole.
through. Is that on both 171st and 161st?
No, there's already an existing passing, or existing A-cell, D-cell lane that we line up with. On the north side, where we line up with Midland Overlook
171st,
at 171st.
okay.
anything else?
I didn't have anything else.
Okay, thank you very much. I have several comment cards on this item. Again, I will remind you to please come up, state your name and your address. This is an opportunity for you to make comments. We limit it to 3 minutes, so Mr. Smith will be our timekeeper this evening. And we ask that this isn't a question and answer period, but we'll hear your comments, and we will be voting on this item at our next meeting, so we're not voting on it tonight. So the first person I have is Marnie Plunkett. Shall we pass it down to Evelyn?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Marnie Plunkett, 205 Angela Court in Cherry Tree Farms. The first concern we have is regarding the roads. The cost of the roads, 161st Street in particular, is in and has been in need of remediation, I guess, for some time. Beaver, the business Beaver over on River Road uses 161st a lot, almost exclusively, I would say, to run east-west. Large dump trucks, a number of them throughout the day. If we are adding more vehicles to that, yes, they might, some would say that they might slow down, but you're also adding that traffic into these large dump trucks, and it is also being used as a bike route still, especially in the spring, summer, and fall time. It is a popular hobbyist bike route. Secondly, I wanted to point out that Noble Crossing is currently at 818 students, and Patrick Haney, the principal there, recently told me that with the new construction that just went on, they can take 850, max 860 students. You put 339 homes, surely that last 40 will be filled rather quickly. And then Noble Crossing is looking at having to expand yet again. As a past high school mathematics teacher at Noblesville High School, I will tell you that our schools are at capacity and bursting. And the increased student-to-teacher ratio and being able to have to meet the cost of hiring more teachers, hiring more counselors, and building more schools and whatnot, I don't know if it can keep pace with the development and the expansion that we are seeing and proposing. Moving the two entrances from from Seminole to 171st and 161st. Again, that's not much of an improvement. Yes, 171st has a little bit more of a wider berth there, but again, 161st does not. And who's going to pay for that? I understand that Gradison said that $1 million might be going toward that, as well as some, but is that money, when if that comes to Noblesville, does that immediately go to, is that slated specifically for the 161st project? Or is that just given to Noblesville, and then you decide on where that money is spent on what roads? That is my question, and I think that's it.
Thank you very
Surely
much.
I'm out of time.
Thank you.
16 seconds left.
Okay,
So
good
you-
job, good job. All right, nicely done, okay. Next is Larry, is it Hoff or Hoff? I apologize that I'm not certain.
It's Larry Hopp.
Hoff, sorry, Mr. Hoff.
I live at 102 Bays Drive, which is right, the house right on the corner on the 161st Street, across the entrance. But I wanted to speak about the water level in our immediate area. I'm a little sensitive to this problem for a specific reason. Our house was built in 1980, and in 2009, our 29-year-old well went dry. We had a new well drilled, which was a sand and gravel well that met requirements, even though it was only 36 feet deep, with the pump set at 30 feet. The water level at that time was 15 feet. Due to the water level going down, we had to lower the pump to 35 feet in September 2013. Unfortunately, due to the water usage from Citizens Energy Westfield well fields and Martin Marietta mining operation, that well went dry at Christmas 2017, and we had a lot of families staying with us, and they were not happy. Again, we had to have a new well. Unfortunately, with the help of the Indiana Department of Natural Resources, we were reimbursed for the cost of the new well by Citizens Energy Westfield and Martin Marietta. DNR has since been periodically monitoring the new well for its water level. A little more history of our water level. April of 1994, the water level was 11 feet. 2010, 21 feet. January 2018, 33 feet. April of 2018, 49 feet, and it's been holding at that level. That was my problem. Water in Hamilton County is a broader issue. There was a water availability report from the Indiana Development Finance Authority in 2020 indicating an alarming increase in water usage in Hamilton County, specifically drinking water and industrial demand. To quote the August 25th, 2021 Hamilton County Reporter, Hamilton County is addressing what could soon become a dire problem, a shortage of groundwater supply. I'm sure you're aware that Hamilton County has started a 3-year, $2.1 billion water usage study. Indiana DNR asked if I would like to be part of this study since they already had some historical data on our well. We readily agreed and now have a sensor on the well to provide real-time monitoring of the water level. Anyone on a well should be alarmed about the continued drawdown of the water level. The continued high density of housing developments in Hamilton County will undoubtedly continue to strain the water resources available to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next I have is Grant Sturley.
Hello, Grant Sturley, 6575 East 171st Street. I raised several of these concerns with you all via email. I didn't receive any responses, so I figured this is probably the best forum to raise some of these concerns. We've talked about the backstory, how this was previously shot down, and the main culprit for that was the concern on Seminole Road, that it was too dangerous for that amount of houses. Like we've discussed tonight, now there's more houses and there's more density. The only answer that we've really been told is this no left turn out. I forget the official term for it. It was news to me that I-Town Church does that. That's the first example I've heard of it. I'm curious among you guys, now thank you for telling me I can't ask questions because I wanted to ask the question, so I'm asking you to ask yourselves, are there any other neighborhoods around here that do this no left turn policy, or is this going to be the guinea pig for neighborhoods? I'm also curious that a lot of what we're talking about around this safety, this was the big concern on Seminole Road, was safety. And the traffic study was funded by the developer. Another question I have for you, has Noblesville, the city of Noblesville, done any independent traffic studies? Any traffic, car count studies, or is it only what the developer has done? Because I would be really curious to see that now we have Midland Overlook with 220 more houses that are currently overloading these streets as well. That, to those of us neighbors, is a huge concern. For the cars leaving 161st Street, they can't turn left. They have to go right. It would be very ridiculous to think that all these cars are going to go all the way to Hazeldale. Very few people go to Hazeldale right now. Where do they go? They go to Seminole. So they're going to backtrack on Seminole, which is, again, too dangerous for the original proposal. Now we have more houses. And they're going to go Seminole to 171st to Cherry Tree to bypass all the 32. We see that daily. You can ask any of us that live around here. That's what they're doing right now. And it's very troublesome to think that, I know not all 330 people are going to go right. They'll go by where we live on 171st Street, but the way the plans were, there's a lot of these houses that are going to be forced to go west towards Hazeldale, but again, they're not going to go to Hazeldale. Same with 171st Street. So 171st Street by our property is the new linchpin solution for this new proposal. And again, when they go the other way, they're not going to go to Hazeldale, to the roundabout at 161st. They're going to go back Seminole. That's what they do now. They do it every day. I follow people to work every day. That's what they do. And so again, I ask if there has been an independent traffic study done, because I feel like that would be very important at this point. And in closing, I'll speak for myself, but I think I speak for a lot of the other concerned citizens that we're not naive enough to think that this development is not going to be developed. Of course it's going to be developed at some point. My ask is that you speak among yourselves that this high density, more housing, with this weird no left turn, but you can go right, and are they going to go on Seminole? Is this the right proposal? Can there be something that's a little bit less dense, less houses on this property?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next I have is Sarah Sterling.
Good evening. My name's Sarah Sterling. I live at 6575 East 171st Street. With the exception of 4 years of college in beautiful South Carolina, I've lived in Noblesville my entire life. I've been organizing our neighbors and other citizens for the last year, not to fight development in itself, as Grant said, but to fight this dense development in this particular place. The infrastructure cannot handle it, the downstream waterways and flood zone that lies within this proposed development cannot handle it, and the ecosystem that will be decimated cannot handle it. This development will destroy patches of some of the oldest forests in Noblesville, and Noblesville does not need another neighborhood that could be in any suburb in the nation. We need more unique and well-thought-out developments that fit into their existing communities without straining them. We need development that maintains green space, that leaves nearly 200-year-old forests intact. We have so few left. That looks not to a developer's pocketbooks, but to what too much growth too fast does to places and citizens' attachment to those places. Magnolia Ridge accomplishes none of those things. Just look to the name itself. It's so generic that the person that named it has obviously never visited Noblesville, where there are no native magnolias and certainly no ridges, especially on this beautiful piece of land. For the last year, we've been sending letters and emails arguing against this development. The city staff and planning commission have given little attention to the concerns of the people that will actually live with the day-to-day consequences of this development. And they have given zero attention to the more than human world that calls this property home. I extended invitations to each of you to walk this property for yourselves and see why so many of us continue to fight this dense of development in this area. None of you responded, nor took me up on my offer. You are elected officials that work for us citizens. You all give lip service to wanting to see more of us, more involved in showing up at these meetings, and then don't listen to our concerns. Our experience with the Planning Commission wasn't any better. We citizens were well organized. We split up our concerns among 20 homeowners so as not to duplicate issues, and after our time was finished, the developer was given unstructured time to respond to our questions. He did so insufficiently or not at all. Then the Planning Committee members, again, either barely addressed our concerns or took the developer's word for it instead of pursuing any follow-up, then voted 6-0 to approve the zoning change. In preparation for the Planning Commission meeting, I read all 230 pages of the 2020 Noblesville Comprehensive Plan, which repeatedly emphasizes a survey of citizens remarking that what makes Noblesville stand out is its downtown and small-town charm, stressing how planners want to maintain and build on that charm in their next development phase. But instead, Noblesville keeps adding more of the types of developments that they've been approving all over our city in recent years, which the houses are slammed in, existing farmland and forests are destroyed to get as many houses in as possible. And despite different builders and so-called elevations, these developments all look exactly the same. Houses one on top of the other with little thought to the conservation of the existing environment. There's nothing unique about them, the very thing that citizens say we appreciate most about our city. I realize that we are probably going to lose this fight. It seems as though everything had already been decided before we citizens even received notice of the revised planning committee in late January, despite our years' worth of efforts. And many of my neighbors have been fighting this developer for a decade. Our valid concerns have not been addressed. The consequences of this extensive development in this area are easy to foresee, and it should be your responsibility to protect the city and its taxpayers with saner development. So I'm urging you once more to reject this zoning change and ask the developer to propose saner development that won't burden this area, its infrastructure, its ecosystems, and the neighbors that already live there and overwhelmingly oppose this development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is Ron Frank.
My name is Ron Frank. I live at 6415 East 171st Street. We moved to this property about going on 6 years ago. And if you've seen it then and see it now, it has changed dramatically just with the Middle and Overlook development across the road. And this development, Magnolia Ridge, has many of the same features, including the builder, Lennar, that we see across the street. We don't, echo a lot of what Sarah said, we don't understand the benefit for our community. Now, I have to say, I'm a little naive on this process. This is the first time I've ever participated, been involved in this process anywhere. But we don't see any benefit for the people of our community, especially for those of us who live right there with it. We have brought up many concerns about water, about the traffic, about quality of life, and none of these have been answered. We've attended many meetings, and we, as Sarah said, we really get no real answers. We have a plan in place. Somebody at some time worked very hard to put a plan in place that says that this should be R1. Why do we need to change it? We could build a residential development there with R1 zoning. And what's wrong with that? But I haven't seen any real willingness to address any of our concerns that we have put up over the past several years. And I would ask you, please ask yourselves, why would this be? And when you look at years from now, when you're ready to leave your time as a commissioner or I'm a council member, will you look back and say, I am so proud that I had a part in putting that developed there the way it is right now? What benefit are you going to be able to cite years from now? Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And the last one I have is Jason Smith.
Good evening. I'm here mainly to talk about the safety.
Can you share your name and your address,
Oh,
please?
yeah. Jason Smith, 16555 Seminole Road. We've been fighting this for a long time. I actually had a traffic study done 8 years ago. I think Tim Oakes at Ice Miller has that, and I paid for it. And it said this development and the traffic that it would bring would cause problems, and it was more than the entry just being off Mill Creek. There were other issues, but now that has gone to the wayside. I have a firm in Carmel that's nationwide, a financial firm, and I've most of my activities take place on a national level, but my wife does practice orthodontics here and wanted to live here because of the feel of Noblesville. And the main reason why I'm here is because of the safety issues on Seminole and the fact that this is just too big, folks. My friend Dave Craig, who lives on Seminole, he would be almost at the north edge. If you're going northbound on Seminole, well, he just got a car through his fence the other night. And kind of for fun, he put the mirror and all the things lost off the car on the fence. Because roads with 7 houses and a sharp S-curve aren't meant to handle thousands of cars a day. And there's not been a thing that's been done about it. And then if I was in economic development, I don't know, you folks probably know some of the economic development folks. We've got no place to put the manufacturing person that we want to recruit. They don't want Lennar and Pulte. They want nice custom homes and probably something that is equivalent to the R1 zoning. There's virtually nothing left in Sagamore. There's nothing left in the neighborhood off Lockhaven, I think off Cherry Tree. And here again, it's not an anti-development issue. It's a safety and a lack of consistency with our R1 zoning and going to R3. And why would we not make this a great neighborhood with R1 zoning that could attract people that would bring a lot of jobs to Noblesville and grow slowly into that? And last but not least, so none of that has been fixed on Seminole Road. It's a very dangerous road now. A truck hit a bus, if you guys didn't know that, on the S-curve. That was about 2 weeks ago. Then when we go into business with public companies like Lennar and Pulte, we have a lot of pressure because they have to answer to their stockholders. That'd be a little bit of the business I do in my firm. And collectively, Pulte is down negative 17% for the year.
If you could wrap up, please.
And Lennar is negative 22.84. Interest rates are going up and so is inflation. Housing's done, folks. And they're going to cut back here. Because that's the first thing we do when we're losing money, is we cut back.
Thank you for your comments. The next one I have is Robert McInnes.
Thank you for your time. I'm Robert McGinnis. I live at 203 Angela Court. My concerns are they're probably going to develop back there regardless. But when I pull out my development, I look at my sign. It says 10-ton limit on the road. Most concrete trucks, stone trucks, 40-ton, 50-ton. How are you going to handle the road? Who's going to repair it? River Road, 10-ton limit. Every road around that development, 10-ton limit. How are you going to handle the road? Are we going to repair it before they do it? After they do it, how are they going to handle it? The road's tore up pretty bad already down there. On River Road, the embankment's going out on it. It needs to be tore down completely and redone. What happens when you get all these heavy trucks going on there? That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Oh, yeah, that was finished. Right. Okay. Staff or the petitioner wish to respond to any of those questions or comments?
Thank you, Madam President. So, I guess a couple of things to point out is on the left end, right out entryway, that was a staff engineering recommendation, and we're happy to do that with their recommendation. They're certainly the experts. I'm not a civil engineer, so I'm going to, we'll do as staff requests there. There were several other things that staff did request that's incorporated in the Plan Commission approval, or recommendation, I should say, sorry. And we're okay doing all those that were in that, including signing on 161st Street for Seminole Road. As far as the 10-ton rule on the road area at 161st Street, that is something that we don't control the trucks that are currently there, right? We aren't the ones who are out there managing those folks. We will make sure that our contractors and our suppliers and our vendors that are doing work at Magnolia Ridge, should we be approved, will understand what the road systems are and direct the traffic accordingly. Part of the some of the issues raised was density, and I guess one of the things I want to point out is on the density side of things is that we are kind of in step with a lot of the other surrounding areas. And so our density, on a gross density basis, so we have 153 acres and 339 units, we're at 2.21 units per acre. And if you look around, we've got 2.36, 2.7, 2.25 at Cherry Tree Meadows, 2.32 at Twin Oaks. So from a density standpoint, there's ways to look at density. And part of the reason for having smaller lots in today's environment and having a mix of product is because that's what the market is dictating. We aren't, market makers. We respond to the market and what people want. And that's what they're telling us that they want. The benefit of that is by us being able to maintain 50 acres of green space, which you don't get in every neighborhood. And so having green space along the ditches, trying to preserve as many trees as we can is vital to what we do. We are trying to preserve a tree line that is here, a tree line, that is here, that's existing. And so we are trying to be good stewards of this ground. We have owned this ground for 8 years. I've walked it hundreds of times. Probably have seen some of these folks around there as I've done that. And we want to make this a good piece of ground, and we want to preserve as much as we can preserve on this site. There are woods that we are preserving in this area. We'll have some that are able to stay here, and we met with the surveyor's department and requested that they allow us to only take down enough trees on one side of the ditch instead of both sides of the ditch as they typically would ask for. So we are trying to be good stewards of the ground from that perspective. The water issue and drainage issue. So as far as drainage goes, as you know, we have to satisfy all the all the ordinances, all the standards that the city of Noblesville, the Hamilton County Surveyor have as far as release rates on our water, and we'll manage those expectations accordingly. And as far as the water and the water wells go, most of our sewer here will be pretty shallow. We won't be doing any dewatering. I don't think we will do any harm to the existing wells in the area from a dewatering perspective. I think those were the main points I wanted to make, and certainly can answer any further questions that you may have.
Any other questions from Mr. Gradison at this time? Okay, I believe we're finished. Thank you. So this will come back in 2 weeks. That gives us an opportunity to be able to research and try to get a better understanding of some of your concerns, and we will be voting on the issue at that time. So thank you all very much for coming this evening. Moving on to miscellaneous number 1. Council to consider combination settlement agreement, covenant not to sue, and economic development agreement between the City of Noblesville and Industrial Dielectrics Incorporated. And for the people who are leaving this evening, if I could ask that you be as quiet as possible so we can continue on with our meeting. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Madam President.
Good evening,
Great to be
Mayor
with you yet again.
Jensen.
I'm going to do brief speaking and then pass it off to Deputy Mayor Matt Light to talk a little bit more in the details. But you'll recall, as I mentioned earlier, Pleasant Street, the east-west corridor, is something we've talked about in the city of Noblesville since 1987. It's been the commitment of this administration to get that project going. I've said earlier today when I was speaking with somebody, anytime you go and put a new roadway or a new corridor in the middle of an urban core, there's always difficult conversations to be had. And we appreciate all of you who have stood by us, with us, beside us, behind us, as we've had those conversations going forward. One of those took place several years ago as we shifted the road alignment for Pleasant Street simply to the north to accommodate an existing state and federally approved historic district. And that new roadway impacted a long-time existing business in Noblesville, which is IDI. They have been a family-owned business that is now an international business across the world, and in business for over 50 years at their site on South 8th Street. After working with them for several months during this conversation, they determined it was best for them to relocate out of their existing site, which we respect, and our job number one was to keep IDI in the city of Noblesville. And I can tell you this hasn't been an easy process. There's been a lot of conversations that have had. I appreciate many of you who have advised us along the way, but last week we announced a agreement with them to invest nearly $25 million into a new facility here in the city of Noblesville, which will preserve the 90 employees that they currently have at their existing site, with plans to add an additional 25 over the next several years. They will locate in a new structure to be constructed in the Washington Business Park, which this council approved several years ago, just to the east of State Road 37. That construction will happen simultaneously with the operation at their existing site in order for them not to shut down during that time. We've worked extensively with engineering and our team to make sure that we can still break ground later this year on the new Phase 1 of the Pleasant Street roadway. So all those words to say it has been a long process, a process that was all along meant to keep a long-standing business here in the city of Noblesville, and we were able to work very hard with your support to achieve that goal last week. So with that, I'll allow Matt Light to come up to go through a little bit more of the details of the agreement that you have in front of you here today. But thank you again for your support. Thank you to IDI's continued commitment to be in the city of Noblesville going forward. So, Matt.
Thank you, Mayor, President Wiles, and council members. And the mayor touched on really some of the most salient points about this agreement. Just for a couple of points from a mechanics perspective. You have in front of you a settlement agreement that includes, as part of that settlement agreement, the economic development agreement. So those things go hand in hand. That was part of the discussions with IDI, that we wanted to, at the same time, resolve the dispute about the property acquisition, and also if we could come to a resolution on that, work with them to then invest in their new site in Washington Business Park. So this does just that. You heard previously in the agenda, Mr. Barris talking about one component of the funding plan for this payment that's included that comes from the American Rescue Plan dollars. There's a second component that's coming in a few moments, a transfer from some of the strategic spend down that was included in the budget that was adopted based on some other project timelines shifting or flexing, but our intent is to still move those projects forward, just at a little bit different timeline. And the other big or most significant bucket, if you will, in terms of funding this resolution is through TIF dollars. There are going to be $4 million of TIF funds that are available. The Redevelopment Commission is meeting on Thursday of this week to take action to approve those funds to be used as part of this agreement. So if council approves this agreement this evening, if the Redevelopment Commission approves that funding from the TIF dollars on Thursday, then we would move forward with filing the settlement agreement with the court, getting court approval of that document, and then moving forward with IDI on the approvals for their new facility in Washington Business Park. So again, the two key things from our perspective, it keeps us on the timeline for the Pleasant Street project and gives us certainty there, and eliminates kind of the risk and uncertainty that we had relative to the property acquisition, and it keeps a long-standing business in Noblesville with the opportunity to expand going forward. So I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions of Mr. Light?
I don't have any questions. I just wanted to thank you guys, you, Mayor, and Ms. Bennett for all the work that your team has put into this. I know it's been a long process, but an important one. So I'm grateful for that work.
Thank you. It was a real great team effort.
Anything else?
Madam President,
Mr. O'Connor?
I'd make a motion that we approve miscellaneous number 1, condemnation settlement agreement, covenant not to sue, and economic development agreement is submitted.
Second?
It has been moved and seconded to approve the agreement with Industrial Dielectrics as presented. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 9-0. Thank you very much. Council to consider Resolution RC-3-22A, a resolution for property disposal pursuant to an Indiana Code 36-1-11-8. Ms. Bennett? Oh, nope. Mr. Light?
Thank you, President Wiles and members of council, Matt Light, Deputy Mayor. Speaking of team efforts, this was another one. Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, council. Thank you to some folks at the county that we worked through some issues on in relation to the transfer of the red lot. As you know, this was part of a kind of a multifaceted approach to strategizing and providing accommodations to parking downtown. This is the updated version that was agreed to by the county commissioners, and it includes a quitclaim deed attached to the resolution, and that includes the same restrictions on the property. If it's ever used for non-governmental purposes, then it would revert to the city at no cost. So with that, I would appreciate your consideration.
Any questions for Mr. Light on this issue, this item?
Madam President,
Mr. O'Connor?
I would move we approve miscellaneous number 2, resolution RC-3-22A as submitted.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to approve Resolution RC-3-22A. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Mr. Boyce? Oh, oh. So, any opposed? 8 in favor, 1 opposed. Okay, moving on. Council to consider Resolution RC-9-22, a resolution approving a project agreement with Patch Development for Washington Business Park Phase 2. Chuck Haberman, good evening.
Good evening. This is regarding Washington Business Park Phase 2. You will recall exactly 1 year today, we approved Phase 1. And I'm happy to announce that 4 of the 7 lots are occupied. There's been approximately 4,000 square foot of building built and occupied, and over $50 million invested in that Phase 1 project. So this resolution before you is for Phase 2, and what that will do is effectively take the 67 acres north of the original Phase 1, 75 acres, and take it out of Corporate Campus West and add it to the Washington Business Park allocation area to enable us to capture TIF for Phase 2. So the city will issue $7 million bond, and we'll pledge 65% TIF to that, TIF revenue towards that. So we're excited about the current assessed value is about $285,000, and they're anticipating $43 million upon build-up. So lots of growth in the Washington Business Park. I'm happy to answer any other questions you might have.
Any questions for Mr. Haberman?
Madam President, I have one. So with this Phase 2, Chuck, how many acres is that entire development? Is this adding 67?
It will add 67, yeah, so it'll be approximately 142 acres total.
And what was the total assumed assessed value with the whole project?
43 for the first, or for the second, and then I believe it was 70 million for the first.
Substantial.
I don't have all the data for the first here. Yeah, substantial. That's a good way of putting it.
I mean, these are key areas. I suppose I was kind of asking you a leading question, but this is what's going to drive a lot of the ability to do different things throughout the city, including road improvements and other things related there too. So These are important developments.
It's a great project.
With that, Madam President, would you like me to make a motion?
I would be happy for you to make a motion, Mr. O'Connor.
I would move to approve miscellaneous number 3, resolution RC-9-22 as submitted.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve Resolution RC-9-22. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed? All those abstaining?
It's me.
You're abstaining,
Yes.
not opposing.
Correct.
So, 8 in favor, 1 abstention. Next item is council to consider acceptance of conflict of interest disclosures. Mr. Peterson.
There's 2 conflict of interest. One is the annual filing for the facade grant committee. Anybody who doesn't know, we're eligible for that program. There's a reimbursement for our architectural fees. Sometimes they wait 2 years, sometimes they come in right away, sometimes they do it after we're gone. They go to the Board of Works, so I never know when they're coming in, but I think I should disclose it. That's one, and the other one is with Washington Business Park. We had a conflict of interest on phase 1 with a tenant, and we've been retained to look at a building. It is very likely they'll end up in this. This is where they'd like to be, so I feel like I should disclose that.
All right.
Madam President,
Mr. Smith.
I move that we accept the disclosure.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the conflict of interest disclosure. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Any opposed? Any abstaining? 8 in favor, 0 opposed, 1 abstention. Transfer number 1, council to consider transfer TA-06-22, an appropriation transfer in the general fund to reallocate funding for the acquisition of real estate related to the Pleasant Street project. Mr. Barris.
Thank you, Madam President, council members. Sam Barris from the Office of Finance and Accounting again. So this is the second fiscal action on the agenda tonight that deals with this property acquisition issue related to IDI and the Pleasant Street construction project. In this case, we are dealing with a appropriation transfer within the general fund budget, so within the existing confines of the budget that council adopted for 2022. That budget included about $4.5 million in the general fund for major capital construction projects. This was sometimes referred to as a strategic spend down of resources for major capital improvements. And so what this action does is it realigns money between departmental budgets or between expenditure series, essentially taking money that was budgeted for certain capital projects and moving it into place to be used for this property acquisition. So there is a list of departments and expenditure series. There are some comments that reference a couple projects here. What I'll say is that in most of these cases, these represent timeline shifts where either the timeline for a project had already moved prior, subsequent to adopting the budget, and work was not expected to begin in 2022 anyway, or they represent things where the timeline was flexible to begin with and could be shifted out. So the total amount of funding from the general fund for this acquisition is going to be about $3.2 million. However, only $2.6 million actually has to be transferred by this action, as some of it is already in the correct department and series bucket to be used, which is the 026 Street Department Improvement and Rehabilitation Department Code. So with that said, I'm happy to answer any questions. This is just a transfer again, so this would just be one hearing tonight, one reading tonight, and can be adopted here.
Any questions of Mr. Barris?
Madam President,
Mr. O'Connor.
I'd move we approve transfer TA-06-22, an appropriation transfer in the general fund as submitted.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve transfer TA-06-22 as presented. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 9-0. Thank you very much. Next item is council to consider transfer TA-07-22, an appropriation transfer in the Parks Program Fund to reallocate funding for a golf position reclassification in the Parks Department. Mr. Barris.
Thank you. So as stated, this is another just appropriation transfer. In this case, the transfer would be coming from non-departmental contingency to it's the 021 Parks Golf Department Code. This is all within the Park Program Fees Fund, so Fund 110 that we put our golf and park program revenues into and then spend those revenues for the operation of our park programs. So in this case, what's happening is there is in the 2022 budget, a maintenance laborer position in the Parks Department that is being reclassified. So we're essentially eliminating the old position and creating a new position within that department, in this case, a crew leader position. That's already a position that exists in our salary ordinance, so there's no need to modify the existing salary ordinance. It is just a transfer from contingency to the department to fund the increase. Happy to answer any questions about the fiscal action. I believe we have Brandon Bennett here as well if you have questions about the position itself.
Any questions of Mr. Barris? Any questions of Mr. Bennett, since he has sat through this entire meeting?
Madam President,
Mr. O'Connor?
I would move we approve transfer TA-07-22 as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve transfer TA-07-22 as presented. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 9-0. Okay. Next item, or last item on the agenda, is council comments. I would just like to congratulate the Lady Millers for being the state basketball champions, and I will be working with the mayor to try to bring in our state championship teams, because Noblesville is very fortunate to have multiple state champions to be recognized by the city council and the mayor. So that'll be at forthcoming meetings.
Excellent.
Anything else? Motion to adjourn? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much.